Welcome to The Threshold is a Prism. This is the exhibition we're in today. I'm the curator. My name is Marsha Harvey Saxon, and this exhibition is part of an art fest that is being hosted by Kulturhuset, Stadsteatern here in Stockholm. And it is a great pleasure that we can activate the exhibition with conversations, reflections. We have a whole weekend, focus weekend today. This weekend focused on digging and on the archive. And so it's especially beautiful to dig into two artists who are exhibiting in the show. If you've had a chance to walk around, you'll have one installation behind the black curtains and one installation in the next room. But I would like to start by welcoming Dr. Anna Tellgren, who will be, who will be our moderator today. And Dr. Anna Tellgren is a curator of photography at Moderna Museet. Among her recent exhibitions are Annika Elisabeth von Hauswolf, Alternative Secrecy, as well as in Lady Barclay's Salon, Art and Photography around 1900, which were both shown in 2021. She is also the head of research at the museum and has contributed to a wide range of publications, including being editor of the book Pontus Hultén and Moderna Museet, from Stockholm to Paris, which came out in 2023 this year. And in conversation with Anna, we have Diana Agunbiade-Kolawole, who works with lens and non-lens-based photography, presented as installations, performance, and prints. At the core of her practice is an investigation of material processes that explore new forms within the framework of established techniques. And I think when you experience Diana's work, you'll see what we mean with all those words. And I'd like to say, if you've only seen it in one light, try and see it in the several lights that are installed. There's a UV light, and there's a normal spotlight, and then there's complete darkness, and you'll get different layers of the work. Santiago Mostyn lives and works in Stockholm, but has strong ties to Zimbabwe and Trinidad and Tobago, where he grew up. His practice foregrounds narrative entanglements in pursuit of new understandings of place, both in cultural and psychic, both in a cultural and psychic sense. Mostyn has long been interested in the interplay of music, narrative, and the embodied self, with works manifesting as films, exhibitions, and curatorial projects. And I will hand over to Anna to facilitate and carry on the conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marcia, and thank you for the invitation. It's fantastic for me to be here in the exhibition and together with these two fantastic artists. And I think a good starting point for our conversation is that you give us, tell us a little bit about the piece that you are represented with in this exhibition. So maybe, Diana, you could start.
Yes.
A few words?
Yes. So the work in this in the exhibition is called Black Glow, and it's a development of an earlier work called Honest Portraits. And what's with this piece, I'm interested in what happens to the body when it's at rest. So earlier on, with the Honest Portraits, which their performance takes the same kind of format. So it's a photographic performance piece where I try to make an honest photographic portrait of myself in front of an audience. So what happens is there is a light-sensitive base, and then I put photographic material on my body, and then I make contact, and then I leave. And then the image itself appears in front of the audience. So when you see the work today, it won't necessarily look the same tomorrow. But when the works are not on show, they are stored away and they are at rest. So I was really quite interested in what happens to the portrait, which is almost like another entity, like a human being, when it's not performing or on show. And also with the work, because it's not a snapshot at any one time, it's constantly moving along. So I'm quite interested in what happens when you try to make a portrait of someone which doesn't focus on that decisive moment or the snapshot or the millisecond of time that represents a whole entire human being. So that's the work we have in the show.
Thank you, and it's beautiful. May I ask, your portraits, your work is always, is it a portrait of you, or could it be also other people, or how do you?
It's generally always me. I have made it once with another person, Axel, Annika, Carson, Rixon, and when we made the piece, I asked them to use water, because at the time I was using developer and fixer, which can be dangerous. So, I mean, they were quite comfortable doing that, but I didn't feel it was ethically correct to ask someone else to take that risk. I was very comfortable. I am comfortable taking that risk, but I can't ask someone else to do it. So we made the performance together. It was the only time I've ever made it with someone else. And we used water, and it did work. So we did that performance together as well.
I'm sure we will come back. So, but Santiago, maybe you could also introduce your piece in the exhibition.
The work that I'm showing is a series of framed photographs called 0818 Past Perfect. And it's a series of traditionally made photographic images. They're shot on film, they're shot with a camera, and they were made in conjunction with actually text work that I was working on, which was a piece called Notes on the Productivity of Nostalgia. And the pictures were made in journeys that I made back to the places where I grew up mostly, and places where I lived sort of before I ended up here in Sweden. And so I was trying to think of what the potential is of images to relocate us in these places where we have a deep connection because we've spent our childhoods there, or we have sort of meaningful relationships to these places. And then take that series of images, put them together, and see if it turns into, let's say, a portrait not necessarily of these places, but of one's relationship to these places, which of course is often very multiple and complicated in different ways. I'm always thinking of those places and where I am in time and space, and the way of presenting that in the case of this work is that I have the framed photographs on the walls, but the walls themselves are made of sheets of watercolor paper which I've prepared with cyanotype chemicals, as well as different other types of chemicals like iron oxide and copper sulfate, which react with the cyanotype chemicals when they're wet. And the wallpaper is not fixed, and so it's light sensitive. And so what it ends up being is that when the exhibition opens and the room is exposed to daylight or the lamps of the room, it starts to shift from a very light, pale lime green color all the way usually to a kind of dark oceanic blue. And I've shown the work a couple of times before in Paris and in Iceland, and the tone that the room turns is completely different in each of those places. And it sort of has to do with the light, how long the exhibition was on for, because it keeps changing every day depending on how much sun there is, how direct the sunlight is. And so it becomes a portrait of the room in which these images which I've taken are hosted. So it's a palimpsest, let's say. There's the place where you are, and there's the images that you're looking at, which show these places in my historical time.
So is the idea that you will always present this piece, it will be different every time that you present it? It's like a performance almost, or?
Yeah, exactly. I think the images, the framed photographic images, stay the same. The arrangement differs slightly time to time, but it is arranged in two kind of horizontal lines with gaps in certain places, just as a kind of like rhythmical, almost filmic representation of these places and people who are portrayed. The room itself, being light sensitive, is reacting to whatever light conditions there are in that space.
So you can say there are different editions of
unique editions, you could call them.
Yeah. I suppose that one reason why I'm invited here is that I'm curator of photography and taking care of this fantastic photography collection that we have at Moderna Museet with 100,000 photographs around, and we have the whole history of photography from 1840s until present day. So of course I'm very interested in your way of dealing with the history of photography and the history of the technique, the photographic technique, and how you use it. Because when I'm looking at your work, in the history of photography, photographers have always used camera-less photograms. Is that something that you have been looking at or thinking of?
Yes. The first thing I learned when I started learning photography is photograms. So I have a very dear relationship with photograms, and I also really enjoy how it's quick, snappy, and how to just create something like this. And I have also photogrammed a friend's baby when I was younger. But I think in terms of trying to work with this, I like that kind of technique of contact, because it records, or it tells us it records exactly as it's supposed to be, but it also records the things we don't see, because when you have the objects placed on top of each other, what is maybe aesthetically pleasing to us is the top that our eyes recognize. But what is recorded is maybe the dead space or the blank space, which is kind of holding what our eye sees. So I kind of like that aspect of photogram as well. So I think it's something that has always stayed with me, the kind of magic of putting something and then taking it away and then seeing what it looks like, because you can't precisely record from your eyes. You can't trust.
There's something mystical always in it. And all famous photographers have worked on photographs, so you are one of them. And you have in this work, Santiago, really, it says very clearly that it's analog photography. So you're also going back, now.
Yeah, in a sense. I have a very classical photographic education, American. And I've fought against it tooth and nail, year by year, back and forth, but it keeps kind of pulling me back in sometimes. And I think I always try to kind of, at some point, because I was a sort of traveling exhibiting photographer for quite a few years in my 20s, and then realized that, I wanted to stop because I didn't know what it meant to be myself in space, in places, being behind the camera. That kind of like power relationship was unclear, and I wanted to make sense of it. And so I think since then I've kind of broken it down and worked in different mediums, but I think I always come back to a sort of photographic thinking in terms of relating to the world. And we're speaking technically, but I guess one way that I relate to the photographic is metaphorically at this point, even though in this case I am working with photographic techniques. And I say that in the sense of, I grew up in the shadow of the British Empire. We both have a relationship to this strange and problematic and painful entity. And there's this wonderful metaphor that Gabby Moser, a Canadian photographic historian, has used, which is, she says that the archive is the negative of empire. And I think if you think about our place, and if you think about our relationship to empire and the histories that we have inherited and how we work as individuals in the world, I think you can apply a photographic metaphor to it. You take something, you shine light through it, you see its opposite, it's in an alchemical process, it kind of comes into being on paper or on any other type of surface which can contain those chemicals. And then you see something there, you see an image, you see something made visually. And that is a sort of representation of the backside, the shadow, the space that's not, that the sun didn't hit, both technically, photographically, but also in terms of the content and the meaning and the reason behind using this technique in this way.
Yeah, using it, I mean, the cyanotype is also, I mean, many artists now are using it. I think in one way it is, they are so beautiful and fragile in a way, but it also gives us the possibility to, as you say, show other things. Earlier when we were talking a little bit, I think it's also interesting that you are doing the opposite that what photographers and scientists did in the beginning of the history of photography. They are, I mean, the photographic technique has been known since the Renaissance, but how to keep the image on something, that was the problem, and that they could solve it in the 1840s. But could you elaborate a little bit on that, because you are doing the opposite in a way. You're doing something, and then it's changing all the time. When is it ready? Or is it ever?
Well, yeah, I mean, we've spoken about this earlier, but yeah, you know, scientists try to fix a moment in time and
the decisive moment.
Managed to do that,
the
and
famous
that developed into the decisive moment in the early 20th century, which is sort of pounded into our heads when you go through a photographic education. But then at some point it feels so Western, you know, to kind of like capture, to hold, to delineate. To say something is this is the moment. We all have a relationship to it, but then I think it's a very kind of, who knows how subconscious, but at the same time deliberate, the process is of walking back on that sense of the decisive and making something which is a bit more open, a bit more kind of unhooked from the linear time that the post-Enlightenment thinking has given us, or that we've inherited.
Yeah, I think it's with a specific cyanotypes, it was used as a means to record an archive. That was how it was really used, especially with people like Anna Atkins, who used it to record plants, and it's a very scientific tool that's supposed to kind of record things like in this photogrammic way and very
even blueprints and maps.
House maps, plants, all that kind of specimen is very much a scientific process that then became something that's used as an expressive medium. And I think now it's because it's so safe, it's not toxic in that sense. But I think for me specifically, why am I interested in not holding the decisive moments, especially when one thinks about portraiture? I think it's a lot to do with specifically my mother and father, and how also my mother was very interested in taking pictures, and she loved selfies. And also, you know, it was just one of those things that she just really enjoys it. And it wasn't necessarily true. With the images that she was recording, it's more like an idea of self as opposed to the true self, and there was that conflict, and I was here, and she was, you know, letting me know she was doing good, but she wasn't doing good. So the more glamorous the pictures were, the worse she was doing. So it was just so provoking, and I just whacked them away, and I kind of wish I'd kept them, but I kind of was really interested in actually how do you use this tool which is so accessible, it's so democratic. Photography is probably the most democratic medium of expression that we have right now. How do you use that in a way that's kind of follows? How do you not precise? I mean, that small second does not represent a human being. So I was kind of more interested in taking not necessarily only the creative aspect, but the scientific aspect in order to allow, to not hold down the medium, to kind of give freedom to not be concerned with aesthetic ending, even though they are very pretty. But I was really interested in this letting go and not need, like, whatever story would be out there, there are multiple angles to get into it. So I think I became much more interested in opening up the medium and not kind of leaving it to suspicion or questioning, or this kind of dual relationship we have with photography, where we know it's supposed to be the truth, but also it's a manipulated truth. So I was kind of interested in that kind of duality of trying to take away as much of the corruption. I really don't like the word of like the corruption of the lens or the violence of the lens, but I think I want to say close to that, but not using those precise words. So.
But I mean, today it's probably more true than ever with the digital photography and print that it's not the truth. you can do anything. But I think it's interesting how both of you are using the technique. It's like a performance in a way in your work, performative aspects. It's an installation, it's lens-based, it's photography, it's also film. I mean, Santiago, you have been working a lot with also film. Have you also worked with moving images?
Not as I have,
yeah,
but I don't think I happy with any output.
But I think that's interesting how you can use all these possibilities and make something else. But even so, you have some connections to the history of photography that I also think is super interesting.
Yeah, I think the photography is so interesting, and also it has a relationship to all mediums. I mean, now we're talking about the actual materiality, the end result of photography, but it was used as the camera obscura to do drawings, to record, and also in relation to print, you know. So I think there is so many avenues to engage with within photography, not just only with the kind of medium or the technique, or also in talking about thinking in a photographic ethos as well. So what does it mean to perform something with, I mean, you can make a lot of things permanent. Now we call it photography, but it also lends itself to printmaking, filmmaking, and all of that levels of, you know, we can even look at animation and layering of images and a lot of other aspects of the medium.
I have also, these days are about digging, about archives. So how do you see that in your work? Are you using, is it your personal archive? Is it that how I should see your way of working?
Yeah.
Or, I mean, is the work kind of archive, or have you used your personal archive in your work?
I mean, in the case of this series of photographs, I guess at least my entry, my approach to photography came from, let's say, a lack. You know, we moved around a lot when I was growing up, sometimes forced, sometimes not. But of course, the things that many people in the world have in terms of, I don't know, a childhood home or photo albums, things like that, you don't have if you're displaced, or they get lost, or they get burnt, or they get thrown away. And so images, family photos, let's say, I have some experience of them from when I was younger, but then they disappeared. I don't have any family photographs or paraphernalia or sort of anything like that. And so when I first started making photographs, I think there was a strong pull just to the fact that I could, the first realization that I could literally make images which can contribute to the images that the memories I had of the images in my mind from when I was younger, both ones which were on actual prints and also just memories, and contribute to that existing collection and also continue it, And in a way, it's what everybody does when we kind of like profile ourselves and things like that. But I think it comes from, in at least in the way that I came to it. It was a more kind of core understanding or need to build on what had disappeared.
So in Past Perfect, it's your own photographs that you have been taking during 10 years?
Yes.
So it's not that you have been in other archives using...
No, I mean, there's one image in the series actually which I didn't take. You can go and see and try and guess which one it is. But no, they're all images that I made in the kind of encounters that I had with the spaces and people in the places I grew up, which are places which are foreign to me now.
But it's the memory of other images, or
it is in a way, yeah.
That you have in your head, or.
Well, it's such a mix, If you go through a photographic education, again, you have the images, you have your own memories, which is one set of images. You have the images that printed out as photographs, maybe the few from an upbringing, and then you have the images that you find in the books of photography, which you're also formed by in a sense. I have to admit that when I think just in terms of framing and content and depth and so on, I mean, the images I make are kind of in a vernacular American tradition, let's say, even though where they're taken is different and things like that. But that's the thing that I've been kind of yo-yoing away from and back to, trying to make it something which is more personal, but also something which is stakes its claim elsewhere in a kind of psychogeographic cartography of the world.
And Diana, you have also, you collect, when you do your performances, it's recorded sometimes not, but that you collect that in kind of your own archive, or how should you, I see?
Yeah, I mean, every performance is recorded, but I don't necessarily always show the process stage, especially in the exhibition. And specifically for this, we asked to not have the performance recorded, but someone did record. And I did get the footage. So I did a book in 2018 with all the performances, so like an image from the performance, and also all at that stage, the photographs of the artworks that had been produced from the performances. And I made it into this, with the same ethos of the work where there is no beginning or end. So it's kind of done with this Coptic stitch that's quite loose, so you can always spin the book round. It's not, I mean, I don't give you a beginning or end. You can find which is the natural way, and it also has this raw photo paper, so as you look at the piece, depending on how you lay it, that also makes a record of how you handle the book and how that functions. But I think, it's interesting because when the performance takes place, I'm never the witness. I'm just present. So I'm always curious to see what it looked like, what can other people see, and also specifically when I first step off and the work is created, I never see that. So it's often like, I thought about it not so long ago, and I thought, oh, I can never stand here and kind of experience the same thing everyone else does, where you just kind of watch the work just kind of like come to life, and it's like, you know, that aspect I kind of miss. So I get to have that from other people's archive, like sending me how they record or how they experience or what they found valid to record. And what's quite interesting is that I get their archives. So when the book, I always have to then remember who took which photo and then credit them and, you know, that kind of stuff, which is also quite fascinating. So when you go back, or when you like retrace the person, it could be just a random person that I would never meet again, but insists, oh, I have the picture, you should have it. And then I have to say, hey, how are you doing? Is it you that, you know? Mm-hmm. So it also relates back to this like relationship with an archive that someone else built for you, but which is also incredibly valuable in that sense. So
you create your own archive, or is this that you tell us about now part of the piece, if you understand?
Yeah, yes.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, I mean, one aspect is that I get the content that other people create for me because they feel it's important that I have that. And then also with this record of the performance, that archive, it's constantly evolving. It's never static in that sense. So it's an archive that's always current, that you never need to update. So I also find that interesting, that the moment you look at it, that is the valid moment to have it as this archive. And then also, and also with the content I receive, they do build their own, because I think it's also an involuntary archive in a way. And as long as, especially now with the people posting the pictures, so I can always see what it looks like. But I remember when I showed the piece, not the specific one, the honest portraits, which is slightly different to this, at Statens Museet. It was on for a year, and I made a new piece specifically for them. And they were really interested in trying to archive it. So I said, oh, maybe you can take one photo a month from the same angle or whatever. But I don't think I ever saw that archive that was supposed to be purposely made. So I think it's also interesting in the labor of putting together an archive as opposed to one that grows much more organically and is done from, I guess, a place of need or passion or want, as opposed to be a chore. So there is that kind of difference. But I should see if they took any photos, actually.
That's very interesting how you collect these kind of works that you present here. And I should say also that you are, both of you, represented in the Moderna Museet collection with the film by you and from the honest portrait.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe thank you. Maybe we should open up for questions in the audience. If there are someone who would like to, who have more questions.
Yes, I have a mic here. I thought I would jump in with a quick question for Santiago before passing on the mic to someone else. You, like in this space, are doing a recording of the room in a way, and you've done this in other spaces with the similar installation, and I wanted to ask you to explain a little bit more about what you record, and if you have had a chance to compare these different locations as you've been collecting them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's simply that the walls of the room, which react, the chemicals in the paper react to the light, and light is different in different places. You know, depending on where the room is, it gets hit with direct sunlight. Light in the north is sharper, and it just, the process is very similar. I mean, it always starts with the same sort of very, very light green tone, but then it ends in a range of blues. And the speed at which this happens, whether it's sort of a matter of days or weeks or a couple of months, and the blue that it ends up as has been different each time that I've shown it. I showed it in Iceland in late winter, early spring, and the space where it was shown, the museum had, direct light coming in through one of the windows, and it became deeply oceanic. It was sort of blackish blue. It was kind of the director of the museum was saying that it was changing even sort of weeks afterwards, even though it had kind of come to what we know as the final blue of cyanotype. It was left out and became something else. Here it's gray. We haven't seen so much sun. We're facing north. So there is light, but it's the room itself doesn't have that same richness of blue in it. It's more kind of grayish blue. And I think it's only a chemical process, but being also alchemical, it's something which I feel like does give some kind of literal or metaphorical, I'm not sure, resonance of how it feels to be here. It's when I was in Iceland, I felt strongly the nature as one does. Like I was really sort of, you go outside and it's a snowstorm, and then you wait 5 minutes and it's like raining, and then 5 minutes later it's sunny. And it's somehow the walls of that installation seem to have some lift, seem to have something to do more with nature there. And here it just seems a bit more dull, but representative somehow, or kind of like reflecting. And I think that's interesting, that one can propose or even think that you can like get a reflection, get an actual sort of feeling or portrait of a place, literally just through chemicals.
But once you take the pictures down, the things that are hidden will start developing and catch up with the rest of the wall. How do you archive that?
Right. So when the framed images come off the wall, I mean, I can show you after the talk as well. They're the original bright green color, and what I will do in this case is I think we'll take the pictures down and then roll up the paper on the walls and then wash them, so fix them. So they'll be left as these 3 meter tall, 1.5 meter sheets which have these staggered rectangles all over them.
Thank you. I've been hogging the mic. Anyone else with a comment, a question, a reflection on the conversation that's been held? Anyone want to jump in?
Maybe I can say something about the recording light. And it's also going back to photography and how it's this negative, positive, where the light doesn't hit, where the light hits. But in this case, all you're recording is the light. And I think that's pretty interesting, like how much light is there? How do we capture not just the sky and the cloud or light reflected on something, but it's just light.
Yeah, and it's the kind of original archive somehow. Because I think it's necessary to broaden or to like not be so polite with this idea of the archive, Like we're given, archiving is not something that archiving is a concept of the West, it's almost born, you could argue it's born in, with Carl von Linné in Sweden, who went around the world and said, this has to be this, and put in all these categories. That's not how nature is, that's not how life works, They're living things on this planet which are neither plant nor animal, that don't fit that category. They're mammals that lay eggs, and there's things like this. And you feel this when you grow up somewhere which is tropical, like how keeping things on sheets of paper and putting them in a room, and it doesn't work. I remember going when I was filming in Tobago a few years ago, and I went to the kind of like Tobago Authority, the Historical Society, and I asked them where the records or archives of the country are, and they said, oh, they're in London, you know, because the UK is the place that they're the ones who went out and they're the ones who took, extracted, and they're the ones who keep the records. And so I think one's relationship to an archive is, at least to that traditional definition, should be loose. We should be talking and making kind of living archives, you know, things which can be considered something which is in the here and now, which kind of, you know, we share orally or tangibly, and they form part of the things which make us who we are and who the next generations become. But they don't have to sit in a dusty old room. That's not our archive.
With those words, I would love to say thank you so much for this conversation. Oh, you had a... We're out of time. We can take it. Yes. I'm sorry. It's 1:45 and we have a talk starting at 2 o'clock, just next to here. So I would like to extend a warm thank you. Thank you very much, Anna, for coming and facilitating this talk. And thank you, Diana and Santiago, for sharing.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.